But if it's recording, it's red, and it's the same button. Zoom in. You should be. That should be good. You should be able to hear everything, even though it's not pointed at him. And thank you guys so much.
Not a problem.
And it'll be, if I get to speak, it's going to be at the very end of the meeting. So. It's in the judicial annex.
Right next door.
It's behind the courthouse, like behind the sheriff's office. It's behind there. It's on Parsley Street.
Okay, I know.
It's a pole barn. They have their meetings in a pole barn. I'm not kidding. It's a really nice pole barn. We'll see you there. Okay. Right.
Okay. Well,
Drive safe. Thanks, guys.
You told me that because I didn't know.
Yeah, it's really weird where they have. Thank you.
Again, if you haven't, if you didn't, you can when you leave. Please sign in on the Suwannee sign-up sheets that are out there, and there also is a presentation for this one, so don't get it confused with the Santa Fe, because I'm likely to as I speak. You know, hey Dale, let's go. Let's see. We'll do the same thing again to see if you in the last like hour and a half you've really forgotten who you are. So we'll go around quickly and say who we are. We've added a few folks and lost some. So I'm Terry Hansen with DEP. I'm the basin coordinator for this area, and we're here to talk about the BMAp, the Basin Management Action Plan for the Suwannee River. This is at the draft stage. This is our required public meeting from 403-067. We'll take comments. You're welcome to give them to me orally. I really, really, really would appreciate you submitting them to me electronically. If you can't do it electronically, if you can put them in writing, that way I can understand, exactly what it is that you're asking the question on. So, a lot of times, you tell me what it is, and maybe I don't understand it right, or you don't say anything, or you think about, oh, I should have said this and this and this. So please, I think it's best if you provide the comments. The best way is electronically through email. Is the best, and you'll have my emails right up there, terry.hansen@depstatefl.us,
okay.
And it's on the handout.
Okay.
Because that's the best way that I'm sure that I get it, and then I can understand. That way, if I have a question about what you said, I can respond to you and go, okay, you asked this, did you mean X, Y, or Z? So please, bear with me, because I can not necessarily hear what you mean when I'll try and answer them here, and if that answers your question, great. But if you have a a concern that you want as a comment, please send them to me electronically. Okay, with that plea out of the way, again, I'm Terry Hansen, and with DEP, and we'll go to Beth Alvey here, who's the program administrator for our section. So she's my boss. So if there's something I say that you don't like tell her, and she'll slap me, although she'll have to do it after we get back to Tallahassee, because she's depending on me for a ride. So, she's got to temper that, what that action's got to be with what the consequences are. So, all right, we'll go to the front here, ma'am.
Nadine Voles, Board of Save Our Suwannee.
Phil Giglio, Vice President of SAME.
Steve Dopp with the North Central Florida Regional Planning Council.
Steve Gladden, Gilchrist County.
Go across the room. Just keep y'all.
Doug Strom, Water and Air Research.
Charlie Fellows, Water and Air Research. John Townsend, Save Our Suwannee.
Jean Wanzer, Gilchrist County.
Bob Burleson, Applied Technology Management here on behalf of DOT.
John Davis, DEP District Office.
What do you guys?
Kevin Wright, Suwannee River.
Brian Brooker, Suwannee River.
Jennifer Sagan, AMEC Environment and Infrastructure.
John Herbert, Geohydro Consultants.
Del Montrusel, Water Engineering.
Charles Sim, Florida Farm Bureau Federation. Dan Buchanan, live in Madison and work for Florida Farm Bureau.
Great.
James Cornell, work at the Spirit of the Suwannee.
George Hockney, UFIS.
Hillary Lester, DOT.
Hugh Thomas, Suwannee River Partnership, and Florida Department of Ag.
Daryl Smith, Florida Department of Ag.
Eric Marsoff, Suwannee River.
Andy Jackson, Suwannee County Conservation District.
Jeremy Gray, Suwannee County Conservation District and the Suwannee River Partnership.
Go along with the Office Bank Work Policy and Suwannee River Partnership.
Ray Hodge, Southeast Maryland.
Yeah, sure, Dallas, Florida.
Mark Ray, Judy Spriggs. Pete Butt, Carson Environmental Services. Bob Knight, Wetland Solutions.
Great, thank you. Thank you all for coming. Again, I asked this question last time, so, is there anybody here that's not familiar with the Basin Management Action Plan process? Is this the first time you've ever heard of it? If it is, please raise your hand, because, as I go through stuff, I know, what information to give, or if I say something and you don't understand it, please raise your hand, and ask me.
It's all new to me.
Okay.
I understand that there have to be public hearings regarding any changes in policies and procedures, and I assume this is part of that.
This is a public meeting that's required, and we'll get into that, by 403-067 prior to taking this plan to adoption by the secretary, so that it then becomes adopted. But so as we go through the process, if you have questions, please raise your hand and get my attention. And we'll try and explain it. Okay. All right. So, welcome. What we have, something that's important, and I just added this. The sort of a late breaking news. The EPA just approved the dissolved oxygen criteria for the state of Florida, and they have not been put into this BMAp because we have to make sure that we meet the criteria for it. However, because there is a DO, the TMDL for the Suwannee and the Santa Fe was done for nutrients and DO. So there is a dissolved oxygen component. But I think, the key is that the major component of this is nutrients as a result of algal mats in the springs. So, reading through the rule, there's the Suwannee River itself has a component of that criteria that's based on sturgeon health. And to summarize it, it was something like at 20 degrees centigrade, you had to have a minimum of 3.8 milligrams per liter of DO or higher, and a monthly average of 5.1 milligrams per liter. Okay, first blush at that data says that it would probably not be impaired for DO, but I don't want to make that as a definitive statement because that's something that has to be evaluated by our impaired waters folks, and then determine that if we meet the DO criteria, that we also meet the biological indicator portion of the criteria. So just be aware that that doesn't really change anything in the BMAp because the actions as we go forward, the nutrient problems are so immense that DO is a much lesser issue. Can still be an issue, but it's something that we'll have to deal with, and we'll deal with it as we go through an update to say, okay, once we have reevaluated the data, what does that mean? So I just put that out there so that we are aware of it, and the direct implications are still being worked out. So bear with us on that one, okay? So moving along. Those of you that were here earlier saw this same slide, only with different colors on it. So I did change it. I put a different header and footer on it. Anyway, so the Clean Water Act, and the total maximum daily load process, the Clean Water Act, set up the TMDLs and, set the water quality. You collected data, monitored and assessed them, determined which of those water bodies were impaired. That means they did not meet their intended use. They had some criteria that was exceeded. For the Suwannee, Santa Fe, it was nutrients or excessive algal mats as a result of nutrients. That's where the total maximum daily load is developed. That was done. And then, the next step down under that is a Basin Management Action Plan, which implements the TMDL. And the key here in the Suwannee, as I talked about in the Santa Fe, non-point source controls. The Suwannee, this whole area is primarily a non-point source, meaning point source meaning that there's a pipe, water comes out and goes into a water body. That's not the norm in this basin. It's pretty much all non-point source. The water is put out on the ground, it sinks in, infiltrates, gets into the conduit systems and ends up in the springs. The key on the BMAp is, again, as I pointed out, is it's a restoration plan. It's a plan for returning that water body to an unimpaired status, and it's in some ways it's a guess. I mean, we think that the TMDL, if we can reach it, we will achieve an unimpaired status. We may get there before it. It may take us after it to reach that. It's a work in progress. We adapt to it as we move forward. So that's really the process. The TMDL, the program itself, and this is kind of a going back a big picture overview. The program is a result of the 72 Clean Water Act, Federal Code 303, Section D, I guess, resulted in the 1999 Florida Watershed Restoration Act. 1972, in this area was when EPA was sued and had to develop an impaired water body status, or an impaired water body list, and say, look, you need to clean this up as a result of the Clean Water Act. Florida came along in '99 and said, okay, this is what we're going to do about it. So this is what we, came about the TMDL and then Basin Management Action Plan process. And the process, it's really quite simple. Collect your data, determine it's impaired. It's not meeting its intended use. And then with that, you put it on a list, that says here it is, this is the problem. That list gets worked through and we develop a total maximum daily load, or how much of whatever that contaminant pollutant is that water body we believe can handle and not be impaired, and that's what we're trying to get back to, trying to restore that water body, and then you implement that through the development of a basin management action plan. So, we're at this, we're down here at this phase right here. We're trying to implement the TMDL through the BMAp. We've already done it in the Santa Fe, and we're now trying to finish it off in the Suwannee. Okay, saw this figure earlier also. This again is from Hornsby's dissertation, and the Suwannee Basin is immense. It goes on up, picks up the Alapaha and the Withlacoochee. I think I got those right. The upper Santa Fe, the middle and upper Suwannee, middle and lower Santa Fe. I think that one's Little River. It's a really big area. We're focusing on this portion. We earlier talked about the Santa Fe portion. But it's important to realize that it is connected to other rivers upstream from it. The data we had suggested that basically at the I-10 overpass was where the river started to show its significant impaired status. So the TMDL was developed. Yes, sir.
Which I-10 overpass? There are several.
The one at
Suwannee Springs State Park?
Yeah, I'm guessing that's where it would be. Yes, sir. The one that's the farthest.
Yeah, that would be the park.
Yeah. So thank you. I never really thought about that there's more than one. That's where impairment started. So that's effectively right here at the the middle Suwannee and then the lower Suwannee. So that's sort of the area. The TMDL was done for both of these pink areas, and because of the size, each one of those is approximately 1 million acres. We decided it would be best to split it up into two BMAps, even though they are almost identical. The sources, the land uses, conditions are pretty much one and the same. And this BMAP, I know if you've read it, as it should not be a shock or a surprise to you, it's almost identical to the Santa Fe, because the options for controlling non-point sources are pretty much the same. So, overview of the TMDL. You take, once you determine that the water body is impaired, we collect data, have a verified period. In this case, it was from 2000 to 2007. Said that yes, we do have issues. The TMDL study results showed that nitrate was the primary factor in causing algal blooms, and then as a result of that, the study indicated the TMDL that 0.35 milligrams per liter of nitrate as a monthly average or lower will not cause an imbalance in the flora or fauna. That number has gone on to be adopted as the state's numeric nutrient criteria for springs. Yes, sir.
Any idea what that load is currently in the lower Suwannee?
The concentrations vary immensely depending on where you're at.
Okay.
Okay. So I can't give you, it is X. It determines, you'll see some slides here from the springs in just a second that kind of give you an indication coming up. Okay. So, the Suwannee TMDL was developed for Suwannee and in the Suwannee River, Falmouth, Royal, Troy, Root, Branford, Fanning, and Manatee Springs, all having that 0.35 milligrams per liter average. So, the BMAp area is going to be basically, this yellowish polygon that covers the Suwannee River. As you're, if you're familiar with the system of karst that feeds it, it's primarily on the east side of the river. As you go to the west, there's not a lot. That's that's a little more indirect. The main conduits and springs are along the east side of the river. This shaded area over here is the Santa Fe that we just talked about. The Water Management District has done a great job, with data. And, if you go to if you've never been there, if you go to MySuwanneeRiver.com, on their water, check their water resources and then their water data portal, you can see a nitrate map. You can call up specific data points that show plots. It's really, in terms of easily understandable data, it's really good. And I thank them for that, because a lot of the stuff that's coming up is coming right off of that. So if you haven't been there, it's worth checking out what resources they have available. And they've also added, I think I mentioned that, they've added a real-time nitrate sensor at somewhere. And I think I put that in here where it is. If not, Kevin will tell me, because I know.
It's the next slide.
I don't remember what it is. Oh, there it is. Look at that. I must be prescient. Okay, and the USGS installed this continuous nitrate sensor, and you can look at that wonderful URL, and see it in real time. But it's kind of, it is interesting, if you want to see what's going on. So, anyway, so that's just kind of an aside. That's available information that's always there. Okay, now I apologize for the faintness, and maybe I'll shut off some lights. You all promised to not go to sleep. Okay, so on some of the red dots. The red dots. That would be why you did that, wouldn't it? Okay. All right. That might be easier to see. This is one of the plots, or maybe it's not. This is one of the plots off the Water Management District, and this is for Falmouth. And realize that I believe that's like 0.4, and I'm going to drop back here to the screen where I can actually read it. You'll have to forgive me. Yes, that's that line is 0.4. So the TMDL is 0.35. This would be 0. This would be 0.2. So if you just say 0.4, you can see that at Falmouth, this goes from 94 on the left to 2011 on the right.
2012.
Yeah, well, this last number is 2011, so it would be the 2012 data would be in here. It hasn't been updated since I put this in here. But the key there is that the data is above 0.35. I mean, that's the purpose of this graph. Yeah. Falmouth has way in excess of the TMDL. This is to give you some ideas of why the TMDL was established, and hopefully it might answer some of your questions, sir. We're seeing numbers up to about. This line is 1.2 milligrams.
There's one at about 195.
Yeah, way up there, way up here. Yeah, in about 95, 90, or 96.
96.
Okay. But I think when you look at it, just as a general lump, they're between about 1.2 and 0.6. So that's up at Falmouth. You go to Royal, there's a data gap, between here and here. This data, this is 1, this is 1.0, so, 0.16842. This bottom line is 0.2, so this is 0.4. So you can see the Royal is nowhere near the TMDL. It's all up in this area, which is like 1.8 to 1.6. So, again, historically, although it did drop off significantly out here at the end, it's down to about 1, but that's still well above the 0.35. So, this is some of the support for why, what the TMDL means, and it kind of helps give you an idea of the ability that, it's all high. Troy, this is 1. So this is 2.5. So it again has a lot of variance, but it's a high number. So roof coming on down. Roof. This is 5. So I mean, realize the scales here are not the same. That's 5. So that means that this is 1. So we're significantly up here in that roof in that 5 to historically in that 5 to 4 range. So again, I know that this is not a surprise to most people that are aware of the data in these springs. Okay, Branford. Again, because of the scale shift, this is 0.4. This is 0.8. 0.2. So there are some that are down here at the scattered at the TMDL or below, but there's a lot up here in the 1 range. This is the 1 line. So again, we have quite a few exceedances. And then Fanning,
Again,
that's
scale shift.
a pretty consistent data trend. The only problem is this is 2.5 and that's 5. So, that kind of helps smooth it out. And I think that pretty much says all you need to know about it. That's pretty high. Okay, and then Manatee. At Manatee, this is 1.5 and this is 2. So again, pretty consistent band, but 1.5 to 2. Again, that's a long way away from 0.35. So, that's I think the take-home message there is that, the springs have high nitrate levels. And, that's what we're trying to reduce.
Right.
And that's why it's sort of difficult to give you, what that daily average in the river is. Because in reality, when I looked at this, excuse me, while I take a drink.
No problem.
The TMDL is the same for the springs in the river. Base flow of the river, is spring flow. But, like now, when it's high and it's got a lot of flow, the rivers are backflowing into the springs and pushing dark water into them, which is probably not a bad thing. It's probably helping smother some of the Lyngbia that's out there. But, you could, when you start to look at it, you could say, wow, it would be possible, to meet the TMDL in the river because of the flow and what contributes to it, and not need it in the springs.
Yeah.
So, and that's partially just because of the input sources. So, the key there to keep in mind is the springs, are the real issue, and that's really what we're focusing on because we're trying to clean those up. Okay. So the BMAp itself, is the primary tool available to implement the total maximum daily loads. There are some other ways that municipalities and cities can go, some other plans. If they have a little smaller area, in an area like the Suwannee, it's way too big to do a reasonable assurance plan, or a nutrient reduction plan, which are other options. So the Basin Management Action Plan is the primary tool that's utilized. Okay. There is a framework for it. It's in section 403.067 of the Florida statutes, and it spells out all the issues that are addressed within a BMAp. So there is a Florida statute for it, and that also is the one that describes TMDL. And in the regulatory framework, this is sort of what I said at the beginning. Just to reiterate it, that the DO criteria, have not been utilized. In this BMAp, the data has not been evaluated, so keep that in mind. And the next assessment cycle in July of 2017, when there'll be a full evaluation, it also includes biology. And so I think, if that necessitates any significant changes, before we get to that, as we do, periodic updates, we'll reflect the progress in that and of what it means. But it is important to realize that, I don't believe there's anything in here that we're saying you must do this to help improve DO, because we believe, achieving the nutrient reductions will help the DO in the river and the springs itself. Okay. The BMAp is our method for restoring water quality. Remember I talked about that at the beginning. It's a restoration plan. We're trying to get that water body back to its unimpaired status. We want it to meet its intended use. And that hopefully is when we meet the TMDL, maybe before it, maybe after it. But ultimately we want to see that impaired water body be delisted. Now the important thing to keep in mind is that graph I showed you earlier, we continue to sample. So we meet the TMDL and we meet the water quality goals. We don't just stop and go away. We keep sampling to make sure that we don't slip back over the line. So that's why this is a restoration plan. It's not a fix it and forget it. It's a fix it and keep track of it. So the BMAp itself is adopted through a secretarial order, and ultimately they are enforceable because of that being adopted through an order. Now, as a state employee, I know it's better in our case with BMAPs if we can get compliance rather than have to get enforcement. It's much better in a basin like this to have people want to make the changes. And that's what we strive to do through education and implementation of some of the efforts, because enforcement is sort of a last resort. And, we can go there if we have to, but we'd much rather people want to do it because that makes the actions be much easier to adopt. So kind of keep that in mind. Okay, the BMAp itself, the BMAp area, you sort of saw this slide earlier, it does extend down into the estuary because there is if you pay attention, there's a, there is a big issue with the, I guess that's what, not red tide, the algal zone, the dead zone that occurs at the mouth of the Suwannee, that's a result of all the nutrients coming downstream. So, it is included in the BMAp. BMAP area itself is 26% ag, 48% forest, and these numbers, are approximate, and they will have some fluctuation. But, to realize that, that's 74% of non-urban, and that's, that's the vast majority. I mean, that's not a surprise to anybody that lives in this basin. It's predominantly rural, low-density population, agricultural or silviculture basin. And that, that makes non-point source pollution control the primary issue, and unfortunately one of the most difficult to deal with. Okay. TMDL went through and identified nitrogen sources. This is out of the TMDL. Vast majority was fertilizer. We're still seeing that today with the data samples we take, that it's inorganic fertilizer that can be commercially applied, whether it's lawns or crops. But it's the granular stuff that's put on people by people onto the property to do some sort of enhancement. That's our biggest issue. We have some nitrogen from poultry, dairies, humans, beef cattle industry, and atmospheric, which is a little more difficult to deal with. But we look at trying to do the biggest thing first, and the sum of the issues of fertilizer, dairy, and poultry, and beef, are pretty much agricultural issues, and that's where we're working hard on best management practice implementation to try and reduce some of those sources. And again, this is the middle, which is the upper portion. Yes, sir?
Is that an annual amount?
Yes, that's that poundage. And this number is probably actually a little old, because that TMDL was done in 2008. It was adopted, and I believe those numbers are like from 05 or something like that. So, I think you could probably, I believe if I look at, when we look at everything that's happened, and again, I talked about this in the Santa Fe, this was based on an estimate derived from land use, and that has some inherent inaccuracies itself. But I think it's, the relative changes, are probably not significant. Okay, and the same way with the lower Suwannee,
Sorry, I have a question about the previous slide. If you say relative changes are not significant, you mean that the relative contributions of each of those sources?
Right, land uses haven't changed significantly.
Right.
There is maybe a little more, human, or a little less poultry depending on the market conditions, but those are all, view this as sort of an estimate, a guide to what your significant sources
So
are.
you're within an order of magnitude.
Yeah, right. And then in the lower Suwannee, we see a little bit of a change. We see more, more cropland and a little more dairy. So, that's, but again, still, we're dealing with, with primarily ag BMP implementation. That's our primary source of trying to help reduce nutrients. Yes, sir?
Same year for numbers?
Yes. Yeah, and if you go to the TMDL, which is referenced at the end, you can determine where these, they provide a lot more detail on where these came from. Okay. All right. So the BMAp itself, again, realizing that we're dealing with 1 million acres, and here, in addition to the Santa Fe, and the TMDL did both, the Suwannee and the Santa Fe at the same time. Oops. I keep pushing the wrong button. I'm just getting you excited about what's coming up. Phases, they're typically phased. We understand the area is so large that, we can't do everything at once. And, particularly here, I talked in the last meeting about an RFA, or a restoration focus area, and determine what works. We're actually a little behind schedule in the Santa Fe with what we had thought, where we thought we would be, but some of that, that was, as I talked about there, and I'll talk about a little bit here, that was our first attempt. We went into this not not understanding what we needed to do and how we would do it. So as we move forward, you know, we're going to see what happens here while we continue to sign up, get BMP signups in the Suwannee area. And, you know, we continue to monitor. You know, we have springs and surface water stations on the river that'll be continued to monitor. You know, and the key is to not press that button, but to, you know, have adaptive management. You know, what works and adjust accordingly. You know, Bob Knight made an excellent comment in the last one, you know, don't keep doing the same thing if it's not working. And, I mean, and that's, you know, I mean, that's where we agree. You know, we can't. I mean, that's one of the reasons we're trying to focus our resources. You know, it's really silly to keep doing something that maybe doesn't get the results you want. So, you know, let's try and work a little smarter. And then as we move into phase 2, you know, hopefully, you know, we'll have additional best management practices that we can implement. You know, we understand that's one of the things we need as we move forward is maybe some new ways of thinking about stuff, and we're going to talk about, you know, where that's going as we move forward. So, you know, the BMAp is phased. You know, this is not a fast process. You know, it's not going to happen quickly. It can't. There's too much area and too much nutrients in the system. So, you know, the key is, I've talked about agriculture, you know, and, you know, as it says here, you know, the Suwannee River Partnership and the Southeast Milk Producers and Farm Bureau is all working with us to try and get this going on and get the word out, you know, that producers are required, according to 40367, to implement BMPs for their commodities or are just designated water quality monitoring plan to show they're not having an impact. And, you know, that's easy to say. You know, it's tough to do because there's a lot of acreage and a lot of folks. And, you know, we're working to try to do that. We're getting, you know, good success in a lot of places. And in many cases, it's just a, you know, a lack of the resources to get out and talk to folks, explain to them what that process is. You know, so anybody that's involved with a with a soil and water conservation district or anybody that reaches out to growers and producers, you know, that education message about BMPs is what, you know, they're trying to push. So now, you know, there are some things going on, you know, in the river right now. One of which is I touched on a little earlier, you know, with the fertigation system installation and center pivot retrofits that we're doing in conjunction with the Santa Fe. There's a Springs Initiative funding for a big recharge area in Dixie County. And then probably, you know, one of the most exciting ones that we're just in the early development stages and working with, actually with Dell Botcher and the folks at Alliance is to try and come up with some dairy projects that, you know, where we can do waste management on. So, you know, as we move, just a summary, you know, on a couple of these, you saw this slide earlier, and I think the Suwannee one is probably correct.
Yes, that's
okay. Right. You know, we talked a little bit about the fertigation and irrigation retrofit in the Santa Fe. In the Suwannee, there's, I think the numbers I came up with is there are 16 systems for fertigation and 15 irrigation retrofits. Some of those are are a double hitter, but you know, because I'm in the government, I like to count them twice.
Well, and Terry, real quick, that was actually counting projects, but actually it's 23 fertigation systems and 33 retrofits.
In the Suwannee.
In the Suwannee.
See there, I'm not even better. And did you double count them too, like I did?
I may have,
yeah.
But that should have led to a potential water savings about 1.5 million gallons per day.
So, you know, and I talked about this in the Santa Fe, and again, you know, it always amazes me, you know, because we get these questions about the water management district, and you know, it is a cooperative effort between DEP and the water management district. And you know, quite honestly, it was probably one of the first ones we did. And you know, you ask the question, well, why? Why did it take you so long to do that? And I don't have an answer other than it's like two government agencies trying to get together. You know, it's just not. It's a difficult thing to do. But thanks to Ann, having worked at DEP for a while before she came over here, you know, she was able to keep pushing. And if you know Ann, she can be insistent. So, you know, and I think that worked. You know, I think we're it's the truth, right? There's nothing wrong with that. You know, you keep pushing until you get your message across. And that's good. You have to, especially with us. You know, we're slow learners. So, I mean, I think it's a good thing. You know, it's a positive action. Is it the be all end all? No, it's just one step. you know, because we have to keep working on what we're doing. The recharge project, you know, it's in cooperation with Suwannee River. It's a water quantity and quality improvement project. You know, that they've estimated approximately 3 billion gallons a year. I think is that a right number, 3 billion? I think I got that from y'all off the initiative stuff. To be recharged into the aquifer and help with flows into the middle Suwannee and some of the associated springs. So, you know, that's good, because if we can keep the flow up, you know, we'll help achieve, you know, the goals we need to for the river itself. And then, you know, the dairy project I talked about, you know, is still in development. So, you know, it's you know, we're trying to determine the feasibility of some solid liquid manure separation and its applicability in the Suwannee River Basin. Cornell did a bunch of work on this, you know, about doing various separator actions to try and allow the liquid to be at a clarity that is reusable on crops through low flow irrigation, which would help eliminate the big guns you see out in the fields that are spraying brown water. You know, it allows a more, if you can separate your waste, you end up with a solid available as organic compost. There has to be some filtering in there to get the fines out. But amazingly, most of the nutrients stay in the liquids, so that would allow a reuse capacity back onto the fields in a much more controlled area, much like we're doing with fertigation. So that's, you know, we're going down that road to see how we could do it and what it would require to do it. You know, we're working with Alliance because they have a digester. Unfortunately for them, they have a problem with their energy production, and the energy co-op that they're in doesn't want to work with them on that. But you know, that shows you how government entities don't interface. And they have my sympathies, because I personally think that digesters are a great way to go for dairies in this area. But
Absolutely.
You know, but there's some issues. Dale, yes, sir.
That issue's been resolved.
It has. So the co-op is going to give them net metering.
Yes.
That is fantastic.
Congratulations.
Yeah,
Good.
congratulations. For those of you that don't understand digesters, they're basically a way of taking dairy waste and producing, you know, taking the carbon out of it. You don't do much for the nutrients. You still end up with a liquid base that's fairly high in nutrients, but you can reuse it, you know, which is the ultimate goal. And the product you end up with, by the time it's all done, is essentially a compost material that can be sold either as a sterile bedding or put back in the ground, you know, as a compost. And in the benefit, you break down the carbon and produce
Methane.
energy, methane, you know, in some form or another. The issue has been, and this is, excuse me for taking an aside here, has been with, you know, when that's done, people that are doing it need some feedback from where they're getting their electricity, that they're either going to buy it or give them credit for what they don't take. And that is a PSC issue with an exemption for certain local rural co-ops and some other issues. So it's been a big issue. So for them to achieve that is really, really significant.
It is.
You know, I mean, that's a really good thing to hear, because that allows, you know, that has a lot of potential for them moving forward with other issues, other projects very similarly, because the digested material is much easier to do this separation process on as sort of a final stage than it is so it comes out as a pure wet product. So anyway, so that's, you know, that's good. We're working with that to try and say, okay, you know, we looked at the Suwannee and those graphs I showed you with the fertilizers. You know, one of the big issues in the Suwannee is dairies, you know, and it's the crops that the dairies grow, you know, use a lot of fertilizers. So we're kind of going like, okay, how can we, you know, make this be a win-win situation? How can we take a waste material, you know, like in a waste lagoon that just keeps accumulating and it's difficult to disperse and difficult to use, you know, what can we do with that allows us to separate it into usable components and essentially a reuse liquid, much like a wastewater plant might come up with, that would allow, you know, fertilizer directly applied. We're also working on some other ideas on nutrient reclamation. You know, can we use, and some of these were dells, you know, can we use scavenger wells? You know, if we know we have a nutrient plume in the field, can we go in and basically do a pump and treat? Is that economically feasible or viable? You know, how do we think of the issues differently in the practice we have, so that we can, you know, reduce the impact that is happening into the groundwater. So that's, that's kind of out there. We're still, I don't know what the way to put it is, we're still discussing the options and how we do it, but I think it's going to happen, hopefully this year, because we have a big initiative on funding for Springs, and I think it's something that we all want to have happen, so it should. Okay, so then the other important project that's happening in here, and I talked about this earlier, so a lot of this will be, a repeat, only the color on the top of the slide will change. The restoration focus area. One of the things, I talked about it again in the Santa Fe, with both these basins being a little over 1 million acres. How many folks do you have in the SRP technicians working in the field? You?
We've got 4 technicians and 2 staff.
Okay, so, at most 6 people, and you, of course, you account for like 4 or 5 people. So.
I'm one of those 6.
Well, what are you doing in here then? You should be out there like.
It's after 5.
Oh, okay. But, that pretty much, it's a resource issue, both in terms of number of people, amount of money, and size of the acres, size of the acreage. It's very difficult to implement BMPs, which we're required to implement the BMPs in the Basin Management Action Plan areas, and then, as they're determined to need, the next step or whatever, to come up with new ones and move them forward. And, some of these we were, and Bob discussed this, we're not sure, how they work, what works best, and that's what we're trying to do in the RFA, is trying to refine that process so that if we know we can come up with something that's really effective, we can skip it, and move it and implement it elsewhere. I sort of equate it to like, telephone technology. A country that doesn't have landlines, doesn't need to put them in. They just go right to cell phones. So you
Africa's doing that.
Don't do it just because, you have it. Think about how it works, and, can you do something that you can move ahead faster. So anyway, those are, that's sort of the RFA project as we go forward. What it is, again, I talked about this before, the idea is to basically, whether you call it a restoration or a resource focus area, what we're trying to do is put our efforts into a defined area, so hopefully we can see the results in a quicker manner. That's the goal. Again, this slide is a repeat. We picked out an area of 185 square miles, that focuses on the Jenny and Gilcrest Blue Spring Sheds. And, I'm going to skip over a lot of this if you have questions, because you weren't here before, come talk to me and we can discuss it in more detail. Or if you want to know the down and dirty details, talk to Pete Butts. He's working for us with URS, and he's, helped install most of those wells and sampled them and been out there in the field and understanding what's going on. So I don't mean to pick on Pete, but, if you need a resource on understanding what's happening in, both the Santa Fe and the Suwannee area, he's probably knows about and has been in most of the caves in the system, and has a really good understanding of how the hydrogeology of the area works. So with that, we're really glad that Pete wants to work with DEP and helps us along those lines, because it's really useful. Because he's been in caves that I'm a cave diver, but he goes in places that I wouldn't even think about going. If you got to take your tanks off to get through a restriction, I'm like, because that means if I got to get out of here in a hurry, I got to do that again. So, not for me. I like the easy stuff. So, the Santa Fe Basin RFA, again, FDAC's role, they pretty much get out there and talk to the growers and the producers to try and get that process moving. And we of course understand, we look at cost share needs and try and facilitate cost share because, quite honestly, that's something that if folks see that there's some money involved, that they can upgrade their system into more efficient, less fertilizer intensive processes, whether it's GPS units or fertigation systems. Once people begin to see that, they begin to realize, hey, I can make the same level of crop quantity by spending less money on fertilizer. Then it's a really a win-win. So and that's ultimately our goal, to keep reducing that amount of fertilizer. Our role is to do the monitoring data and see what's happening. Okay, and as I said on this one, it's underway. I had said on in the Santa Fe one, and I'll do it here too, I'll post the report on this website. So, you know, the BMAp in general, I kind of went through it quickly because it is almost identical to the Santa Fe. You know, it identifies, you know, the potential sources. You know, they're primarily agricultural based. You know, we have some actions moving forward to try and reduce nutrients. One of the things we are doing is, you know, before we plunge ahead with an RFA in the Suwannee, we want to get more information on what's happening in the Santa Fe. And again, that's just, you know, in my mind, that's just good common sense. You know, there's no sense in spending money and committing resources unwisely. That doesn't mean that the Suwannee River Partnership is not still soliciting BMPs. You know, they are. You know, that goes on every day, everywhere. You know, we have the projects we realized we've sort of focused in the Suwannee in the dairies because we realize they're a significant portion in the Suwannee. And, you know, hopefully we're going to get some interesting projects going there to try and help move that waste reduction process forward. Okay. So this Basin Management Action Plan, you know, I say up there till October 15th. You know, you can have longer. I won't, you know, if I get a comment from you all on the 16th, I won't reject it. You know, we accept comments. You know, we want people to comment on this. You know, it's a process, again, that people have to want to do. You know, I realize that, you know, many of the actions are somewhat vague because we don't really know what effect they'll have. I mean, you know, we're working with a really big area on a really diffuse non-point source system. Eventually after that, the BMAp is finalized, goes to the Secretary for signature. Then there's the adoption process. We publish a notice in the newspaper about it. Which by the way, makes me ask the question. Did anybody here see any of the notices in the newspaper for this meeting? Well, there we go.
No.
I was gonna ask, is it paper of record for the state or paper of record for each county involved?
It's paper of record for the county involved, and I put them in Gilchrist, Madison, Suwannee, and all of them, like 6 or 8 newspapers.
Okay.
You know, I mean, fortunately, you know, in this part of the world, they're relatively inexpensive. You know, like a legal notice is only like, you know, less than $100. You know, and no offense, I mean, this is typical. You know, I just did this in Tampa for the Alafia River and the Manatee River. You know, there the Tampa Tribune gets like $500 for a legal notice, and I ask a crowd like this, and no hands go up. You know, and I'm a state taxpayer just like everybody else. You know, and I'm like, ooh, you know, that hurts, but you know, it's required. I'm not saying we won't do it, but I just like to know if anybody did notice it. I'm guessing y'all got notice email-wise. Yes, Amy?
Terry, I'm wondering if we could request a little bit longer. I mean, I know you said you can't come on the 16th, but it's going to be pretty difficult to get the word out sufficiently. And that's 2 weeks.
Okay.
Just
sure.
saying.
Yeah, no, I'm okay with that. I mean, you know, I picked that date because again, I'm working Alafia and Manatee at the same time, so it's like, okay. I mean, the BMAP went out, you know, the notice of the draft was available, went out about 2.5 weeks ago when I first sent out the save the date notice. I gave the link to where the BMAP was. But I don't have a problem with it going longer. I mean, you know, would...
maybe 30 days or something?
Okay, let's say that, what is this? This is October 1. How about November 1? Is everybody okay with that?
That's fine.
You know, I mean, I'm okay with that. You know, it's, you know, we're just trying to get this done before the end of the year. So that's our ultimate goal. You know, I'll send out an email on comments. Again, please send them to me electronically, you know, if at all possible. I'll let everybody know that in an email.
Thank you, Terry. I appreciate
Yeah,
that.
no, it's, you know, that's, you know, we don't, this, you know, again, I'm going to come back to the fact that, you know, if I say no, it's got to be then, you know, that's a little too dictatorial. I mean, we want people to want to do this. So if that helps, we're there. You know, we're okay with that. After that process, you know, we present it to the secretary. It gets adopted. Then the notice goes again in all those newspapers, and I'll send out an email so that everybody knows it. There's a 21-day period where you can protest it. You know, where you can protest the BMAP and say no. You know, this is like, you know, the most craziest thing I've ever heard of, or whatever. After that time frame, you know, the BMAP is officially adopted. So that would say if we have a November time frame, you know, we're looking at probably before Thanksgiving to get it to the secretary. You know, somewhere in there, 21 days, you know, it'll be, you know,
Lost in all the Christmas sales.
Okay, think of it as a Christmas present. Hopefully we'll get it done before Christmas, you know, and so that it can be adopted before the end of the year. So that's, I mean, that's the ultimate goal, you know, is to get it done before the end of the year, okay? Let's see here. Okay, questions, and I think the next, oops, sorry, I didn't say that because I didn't give you the whole information slide, so I apologize for that. You know, all the information will be posted. If you pick up, if you didn't get it, I'll give you one of these from the Santa Fe that shows where it's all at. So, if I don't fall over here. Okay, matter of fact, I'll make sure you have one here. There at the end on the bottom, you know, that's where everything will be posted. If anybody else only came here and didn't get one from the Santa Fe, you know, let me know and I can give you the place where it's all going to be. I should have put that slide in here, and for some reason I didn't. So, questions? Yes, sir.
You have mentioned more than once non-point source pollution points. I know of at least one point source here in the county that concerns me, and that's Pilgrim's Pride print. They've got that pipe dropping right into the river.
Right.
And I know that the sewage plant in Valdosta has been discharging quite a bit of waste into the Withlacoochee that winds up right there at Suwannee Springs State Park, which is just upstream for the bridge. And are these point sources going to be included or monitored or in some way controlled?
The one in Georgia is not. The one in, because it's in Georgia.
They have had an article in the paper I've seen where they're fishing for federal funds to redo the plant.
Yes, I
I
think
hope
actually,
that's done soon.
I think actually they got some too, because they're really in a bad location in Valdosta. They flood easily is what happens. They get too much water coming into it. But anyway, and Pilgrim's Pride does have an NPDES permit, and they are in compliance with that permit.
They are?
Okay, yeah. They're immediately upstream of the start point. Upstream. Okay. Other questions? Wow. Yeah, did I tire you out on the Santa Fe? See, that worked really well then, didn't it?
What's the question from Annette?
I just asked it.
Okay.
So all I can guess is, you know, stay tuned, you know, because I'm actually pretty excited about the stuff we're trying to work on with the dairies, because I think it's got some potential to be useful. So, you know, that's probably the most exciting thing we're doing, and see that happen. So, stay tuned. All right, with that, I thank everybody for coming and spending their time.